Jake Tran, he makes videos exposing corrupt and greedy politicians, unethical businesses, and topics like that. And as a result of the great videos that he makes, his channel has grown exponentially over the past 2 years.
When social media marketing agencies started to become popular back in 2014, 2015, it was a good opportunity.
But the problem is that Jake is undeniably the exact type of guy that would do everything that he pretends to expose in his videos.
We were just drooling over the idea of just having a few clients pay us a ridiculous retainer every month for running what seemed to be a few simple Facebook ads.
It was all just a plan to get a large amount of people to like and trust him.
But you know what? You learn the most from failures. You're probably interested in doing this to make money. So what happens? You have people trying to take $13,000 from business owners.
I am not anti-sponsorship. I don't think anyone has ever gotten hurt by a Ridge Wallet sponsorship, for example.
You actually need to be good at the ads you'll be running, which is pretty hard.
All I ask from fellow creators is to be reasonably ethical when it comes to the products and services that you promote.
Hard work had been Nixon's way out of his impoverished small-town background.
I created my own little niche where viewers really only had me to go to.
Nixon was ideally placed to exploit the country's deepening crisis in Vietnam.
I should not be working this hard, and I should be, making a lot more money while working less.
The Vietnam War had gone disastrously wrong. Americans were dying at the rate of 200 a week.
Step number 1, open up a bank or manufacture war materials like weapons, raw materials, soldiers, or services.
Nixon instructed his staff to treat the campaign as what he called all-out war.
Destroy the trouble spot and all of its inhabitants. I just couldn't believe that not only had so many young American men participated in such an act of barbarism, but that their officers had ordered it.
The viciously profitable business of scamming your own fans.
BlackRock, one of the most powerful companies in the world, struck a deal with the president of Ukraine. What is the deal? To have BlackRock reconstruct Ukraine after the war. The world's largest asset manager, an investment company responsible for around $10 trillion. You can see the world for what it really is. A giant game of acquiring power. You can't get out of this game either way, so instead of being a victim, why not learn to be a better player?
Yeah, everything changed when I got into all that controversy. So yeah, don't have any friends.
Not enjoying human company is a bit of a handicap.
I just never had any friends. I was always a loner. And I just never fit into any clique. Like, I didn't fit in with nerds. I didn't fit in with, like, the anime kids. So I was just always alone.
As president, Nixon's grand strategy was a new set of relations with Russia and China. But first, he had to resolve Vietnam.
When you don't have friends, there's naturally less social pressure on you to follow the norm. So that's why you see a lot of successful people, a lot of them were usually loners growing up.
When the strongest nation in the world can be tied down for 4 years in war in Vietnam.
What were you like as a kid?
I was always super quiet.
When a nation with the greatest tradition of rule of law is torn apart by unprecedented lawlessness.
Over the past 3,400 years of human history, we've spent only 268 of them in peace.
Seething resentment drove Nixon's political ruthlessness. His impoverished youth had left him with a deep grudge against America's privileged elite.
And it's because of these life or death scenarios and these opportunities for massive profits that incentivizes governments to willingly forget about its laws. Forget about the prosperity of its citizens, the prosperity of its economy, to make sure that above all else, its military is well-funded, well-equipped, and well-trained.
I think that it was Winston Churchill who once said, "A country without a conscience is a country without a soul." And a country without a soul is a country that cannot survive.
What starts the process really are laughs and slights and snubs when you were a kid.
You won't get it unless you want it, and we want it now!
But if you are reasonably intelligent, and if your anger is deep enough and strong enough, you learn that you can change those attitudes by excellence.
You know what I always tell myself? Man, if only I was born earlier so I could have bought real estate at the bottom during 2011. Why didn't I just jump in when TikTok wasn't the #1 social media platform? What if there were other industries like the real estate boom, like the .com boom, like the mobile app boom?
Jake Tran turned from a cute-looking beta to a full-time YouTube scammer.
In 1956, to store just 5 megabytes of data, you needed a hard drive the size of an extra large commercial refrigerator.
The secret on how to get wealthy and powerful.
Today, we can affordably hold over 51,000 times that amount on the tip of our finger.
What the f am I supposed to learn from a 20-something-year-old kid whose only business is a YouTube channel?
1984, US first consumer mobile phones, the Motorola Dynatac 8000X. Price tag $4,000, weight 2 pounds, and a 10-hour charge time for just 30 minutes of talk. Ancient by today's standards, everything about it was a giant leap forward and nothing short of revolutionary.
And now he started a Hustlers University clone.
Pull this cell phone out of your pocket. It has more memory than all the memory made for every computer in the world in 1970. And you buy it for 1/1,000,000th the cost of one computer at that time.
Publicly, Nixon talked peace in Vietnam, but behind the scenes, he arm-twisted South Vietnam to withdraw from President Johnson's peace talks.
Every $1 million business, every $1 billion business, every brick and mortar business, education, government, you name it, is at a plateau.
To win the election, he was prepared to undermine his opponent's bid to end the war.
We're talking computing something that would take current supercomputers that range in the hundreds of millions of dollars, 10,000 years to compute in something like 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
So the biggest revenue stream is going to be sponsors, where companies will pay multiple thousands of dollars just to have a 60 to 90 second ad within your video.
Nixon won. The outsider became the ultimate insider.
My goal is to have every video sponsored, because a video that isn't sponsored is just a waste of digital real estate.
Born in Vietnam, Jake Tran moved to Southern California with his family when he was 2 years old. Struggling in elementary because of the language barrier, Jake only slowly became a straight-A student as he got a better grasp of English.
Military might alone was clearly not going to end the war in Vietnam.
But all his plans changed when a friend recommended he read The Millionaire Fastlane by M.J. DeMarco.
That book pretty much changed my life. At the time, I was leaning towards becoming an academic.
Nixon and Kissinger were sure that secrecy was the key to success in negotiating an end to the Vietnam War.
Always knew Jake was not to be trusted. Struck me as if somebody is going to benefit from unethical behavior, so better it be me kind of guy. He made the videos on the evil companies not because he thought they were evil, but because he admired them.
Better relations with Russia and China were his long-term goal, but now he also seized on this as a way to put the screws on North Vietnam.
Normal business profit margins are around 10% give or take, but wartime profits? Ooh, especially with the big wars, we're talking 20%, 60%, 100%, 300%, 800%, the sky is the limit.
What did you expect out of a channel that teaches you how to be evil?
As the Vietnam War dragged on, Nixon's paranoia about his enemies at home intensified.
Sir Jung Mi Lan, an ambitious Vietnamese woman that wants to become a billionaire. The problem is making billions legitimately in a poor country like Vietnam is next to impossible.
He told Kissinger,
"We're doing the China thing to screw the Russians and help us in Vietnam."
Come on! All we are saying.
So in 3 dramatic months in 1972, Nixon had overturned a quarter century of Cold War history, becoming the first US president to visit the 2 capitals of communism.
You somehow weaseled your way into one of the top 5 biggest banks in Vietnam, and you literally just started taking out fake loans and then putting that money into your own pockets.
How long did it take you to start making money with YouTube?
Back when I was doing like the face videos, just me on camera, I was making nothing.
On the outside, you look like the biggest inspirational female entrepreneur Vietnam has ever seen. In reality, you had managed to steal some $44 billion from the Vietnamese people in one of the biggest banking fraud cases in human history.
If Washington thawed relations with Beijing, that would alarm Moscow and make it cozy up to America. The price he would exact for these new, improved relationships would be an end to both Moscow and Beijing's support for North Vietnam.
If you don't know what BlockFi is, it's one of the biggest failures in all of crypto history. BlockFi was a digital asset lender. They would use grifters like Jake to lure customers in by promising high interest rate returns.
Vietnam has been really trying to prove itself as the next China that was set to explode, to present itself as a safe, stable country that's going to the moon that money should flock to.
Kissinger had secured China's agreement in principle that the president would visit Beijing. For Nixon, this would put pressure on North Vietnam and advance his great goal of global détente.
If you accept sponsorships from scammers, cheaters, or liars, you are at fault just as much as the scammers themselves for intentionally promoting that product to your fans.
One of the biggest corruption cases in the country's history. A scheme to defraud the Saigon Commercial Bank of more than $12 billion over a 10-year period.
The opening to China was a stunning public relations coup, which took the world by storm.
I started making a few thousand a month right away, and then maybe like 6 months in, probably like 10K a month. And then I specifically remember getting up to like 20, 30K a month a few months after that.
Back in Washington, Nixon fumed impotently that Henry was simply breastfeeding the Soviets.
Tell him no discussions of the summit before they settle Vietnam, and that is an order.
You know, Asian parents, their dream is for you to be like an engineer or something, or a doctor. The max you can make is like 2, 3, maybe 500K a year. So I was like hitting that right away, and my parents were just blown away.
Nixon's policy of détente, relaxing superpower tension, offered hope for an end to the Vietnam War.
Under the Paris Peace Agreements of 1973, the Americans withdrew all combat troops from South Vietnam, and they also withdrew a lot of military support.
Part of what irked Nixon was that Kissinger's jet-setting diplomacy had still not delivered peace in Vietnam.
The South Vietnamese army having to do much more with much less, and at the same time, they were extremely demoralized. There was a very high desertion rate, a very high corruption rate among the officers.
This most secretive of presidents had documented his own crimes through his tapes.
I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next few years.
I think Jake used to make some of the best videos on this entire platform, and if he wasn't a scumbag scam artist, there would be no good reason as to why anyone should be hating on this dude.
North Vietnam acknowledged South Vietnam's right to exist, at least for the moment. Nixon had extricated America from the mess and got the boys home.
There's as much slavery in a country today as there ever has been. You got 300 million people in this country that are slaves. It's called the middle class.
What really hurts in matters of this sort is not the fact that they occur, because overzealous people in campaigns do things that are wrong. What really hurts is if you try to cover it up.
He basically says that people around the world are paid pennies on the dollar for the work they do by companies like Apple, and I think what he's trying to say is that that's why you should also be immoral like him.
The internet marketers selling these courses usually like to stretch the truth of their students' results to sell more courses.
My experience with Jake Tran's Faceless Income Challenge course, actually I'm impressed that a young Vietnamese American was able to achieve so much success. I see that people have been conned by some cryptocurrency promotions. Clearly people should not risk investing any more than they would be prepared to lose on any speculation, which should theoretically be only 2% of total portfolio value. There needs to be a strict discipline, adhering to absolute rules for protecting the main body of principal capital. Jake says that he only needed to be one step ahead of his viewers and students. How much have I learned? Can I go viral? Can I advertise, promote, and sell? It is possible, though definitely not easy. Interest levels from the mass viewer population can vary considerably. Jake preaches entertainment value to capture maximum idle interest. It makes sense for me to choose serious-minded subjects. People do need light relief, and as a musician, I perform with that in clear focus. Jake's educational courses are actually very challenging and demanding. You need to find a very strong commitment to following important precepts. It's hard for students to blend their own personal interests with Jake's template for success. However, I have not written off the system. I do feel that some of Jake's perspective on things being evil and his catchphrase, "stay dangerous," kind of frivolous, but I think they have won lots of fans for him. He presents a challenge which is closely akin to undercover journalists breaking stories with unknown details. I like an unambiguous standard, which is not cruelly exploitative. Jake seems to adopt a cynical view that corruption is inevitably ubiquitous. The implications are that the fight which wins presently is the cynical one. However, we must realize that many bad characters do end up being punished for their crimes. In his favored film War Dogs, there is prosecution and incarceration for all the exciting freedom that is enjoyed. There is always tension over time, having to watch the clashes of power which seem indifferent to human suffering. It is an eternal continuum of rival agencies vying for more power.